All right, hello and welcome everyone. While we're having the last couple people stroll in, we'll do some introductions and stuff like that. There are no slides for tonight because it's an interview, and the screens are not working, so it happens to be a really good night for both those things. So upcoming classes. Brian is teaching the best decision-making tool for evaluating real estate investments next Wednesday, August 29th. What is that about?
It's going to be amazing. I mean, really amazing. So amazing that James is looking forward to it. So you know it's got to be at least perceived to be good. Whether it's good or not, TBD. That class is basically about how to use skills I learned while playing professional poker to evaluate business decisions and why that's important to you, especially as it relates to taking shots at different stuff. So.
Awesome. And then the week after that, next Wednesday, not next Wednesday, Wednesday after that is Deal Alchemy, how to create deals in a deal-less market. And how many people have seen my return on investment quadrant before? Okay, so this class is going to be all about manipulating the return on investment quadrant and moving areas of return from one part of the quadrant to the other. In our market, it's hard to get positive cash flow. Put 20% down. In most of the properties in Fort Collins especially, you're going to be break-even cash flow. Cash on cash return. And so this class will show you how to change and move your return on investment from one of those quadrants to the cash flow quadrant so that you will be able to improve your cash flow in the market. And it'll show you a bunch of other things like that. But it's going to be a really good class. I have not written it yet, but it's going to be amazing. And then Brian and I are both teaching When Real Estate Investing Goes Horribly Wrong on September 12th.
That's not going to be amazing. It's going to be what happens when things go wrong. It's going to be all our sob stories. Yeah, that's not the right name for the class, though. It was like, what happens when you beep up or something? I don't know.
I don't remember that. And then September 19th, I'm teaching Buying New Houses as Investments and Nomads. So we've done a bunch of classes before, but I've never taught a class on buying straight-up new construction. So that class is going to be on the 19th, and it's going to be really good. We're going to go over all the stuff related to new construction. And then Brian is going to be teaching a class on September 26th. What's the class you're teaching?
I just read it. Apparently, I'm teaching a class on Amazon. How to make $1 gazillion starting with nothing and doing nothing. Yeah, you're going to be amazed. Don't bother coming to class because you don't need to do anything to make $1 gazillion.
So actually, Brian was out of town last week, and usually we discuss the upcoming classes and figure out what we're doing on the schedule. And we did not have time to discuss that, so I did a placeholder class. And so I don't know if he's really teaching that or not. We have yet to discuss it. We'll probably discuss it tonight and tomorrow to kind of figure out what we're teaching. So with that being said, though, the intros for tonight, who are you, and then what class would you like to see next based on us not knowing what we want to do. And there are no slides, so there's nothing to record. And we do try to put recordings up for the podcast on the website. So if you need to have access to that, you can do that. So we'll go around the room and do introductions, and then we'll get started with the interview.
I'm still Brian Williams, long-term buy and hold investor in Northern Colorado. I would like to see seller presentations.
I'm James. I'd like to see a class on getting more in depth on comps in complicated markets.
Okay, let me comment on this. So we have a class we've already done on comps. We did it not that long ago. It's probably like 6 months ago or so. And so if you want to see the class on comps, it's already a 2-hour recording. If there's specific things in addition to that you want to know, let me know. And if there's enough to do a class, I'll do another one. But most of the time, after people see that, they have enough to do the comps. So if you review that and you still have questions, definitely let me know.
Yeah. My name's Joe. I am a long-term buy and hold investor as well in Northern Colorado. I would really like to see a class on how to build your own Excel spreadsheet. Comment?
So here's Brian to comment. Oh, wait, there was no comment. It was just a hug. So Brian taught that class before.
Are you being serious or no? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian.
I thought you were joking, and then I was like, maybe he's being serious.
No, Brian did actually teach that class before, and we determined that we'll never do that again. That we just will give you the spreadsheet in the future and tell you to use it.
Questions about Excel, just email James.
Yeah, my email address is brianwee@outlook.com.
My name's Brandon. The most recent class I went to was new construction, so it's on there.
You ask, you shall receive.
My name is Will, and I'd like to see a class on buying portfolios and apartment buildings,
Portfolios? Like, what do you mean by portfolios?
like real estate portfolios.
Like someone who has 5 houses. they want
Yeah,
to
and they're ready to sell the whole thing.
We do have a class on apartments. So that's the multifamily class where we go over stuff. And I think the largest, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the largest number of units we've done, but it's pretty big. But we haven't done portfolios.
When was the apartment one?
I don't know, 6 months ago, 3 months ago?
Oh.
It wasn't that long. Yeah, it wasn't that long.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Sarah, and I don't really have an answer, but I have been enjoying the case study stuff.
Oh, the interviews?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
very
okay.
interesting.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, I'm Austin, and I've been enjoying the interviews as well, so thank you all. I think my question's kind of as far as some of your guys' next steps, what do you think some of that would look like is as far as, would you ever go bigger? What would that look like? Anything from, would there be any interest from like what we hear about from the blog vlog world of syndication to crowdfunding to stuff along those lines? Would there be any interest? If no, kind of what's the reasoning behind, rationale, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you. I'll give you the short answer to that. I have no, I have no qualification to teach syndication. I've not done them besides doing partnerships, smaller partnerships. So for us to feel qualified to teach that, I just don't feel qualified.
I'm Michelle Mills, Austin's wife. I think the Amazon class sounds kind of cool.
Like, just keep that on the schedule.
I'm Tammy Orr, and I probably won't add any classes. I don't know, maybe a rogue workout class. Everyone can come in their rogue shirts. Brian can do like boot camp.
In for that.
Yeah.
James, let's see your best squat. Go. I can't even squat at all.
I'm Denise Malal, long-term buy and hold in Northern Colorado.
No class? This is what happens when you teach everything already.
My name is Vic. It's my first class here, but not my first meetup for real estate investing.
Okay.
I'm pursuing wholesaling real estate.
Nice.
So just finding more cash buyers, really what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
That's about it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
I'm Jessica, and I'm pretty sure you have a class on whatever I would want to.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I am a newbie, and I am just taking it all in right now.
Okay. Well, do you know what you want to do?
No.
Okay.
This is my mom. She got drug along.
Oh.
I'm Kaylee. I am getting ready to become a real estate agent,
Okay.
and so we're just kind of here soaking up knowledge.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Janice. This is my first time here, and I'm interested in finding out more about wholesaling.
Awesome. Thanks.
I'm Daphna, and I do Nomad and then looking at long-term buys and holds.
Awesome. Thanks.
I'm Eric. Excuse me. Future Nomad, I think in a couple years, but you've already done all the classes I can think of, so.
Yeah. Thank you for that. You're welcome.
Dan Smith. I'm very interested in pursuing the Amazon thing. So if you need another vote for that class, I vote for it.
I have an idea. The Amazon class is going to be precursored by a half-an-hour workout. If you can make the workout, I'll teach the class.
I'm Kevin. I am also looking to start the Nomad journey, and no classes.
I'm Chris, and I have no idea what kind of class I would want to see. This looks like a pretty good list, so.
Awesome.
I'm Christophe, fix and flip and buy and hold. I'm interested to learn more about new construction in the area.
I'm Munir, and I guess I have no class.
I'm Pamela, and I was interested in fix and flipping, but now I'm going more into being interested in just real estate investment with little to no money that I do have at the present, but utilizing resources and doing investments is basically what I'm interested in.
Awesome, thank you. You guys snuck in late. You guys get to introduce yourselves and just say what class you want to have us teach.
I'm Emily, and boy, I can't think of a class on the spot, so sorry.
What class we'd like to teach? Brian specifically.
My name's Mike. I'd like to have a class on buying notes.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone.
I want to request a class.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. You introduce yourself and do your request.
I'm Jason. I'd love to have Brian teach a class on how to win aggressively playing 2-7 offsuit.
Yeah, I can show you how to do that. All right, so we do have the podcast. If you go to podcast.ncraig.com, there's like 124 classes up there at this point. And now we're going to start the interview. So this is Mr. Y. If you remember, we had an interview, I don't know, it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and we had someone else come in who also wanted to remain anonymous. For similar reasons, I think we're actually having you remain anonymous. But he said his name. But, I mean, I think once you get the audio part of it, it's fine. But he has a rather unusual spelling of his name. And so people searching for it in text, it's a little bit easier for them to find that way. But I think you're fine with people knowing who you are.
I'm Jason.
Yeah, see? It's fine to do that. So what I'd like to do is remind you guys, it is really tricky, hard to find people who are willing to kind of come up here and share extremely personal information about themselves. And you have editorial control, final editorial control, where if you say something that you don't want to have out on the recording, you could tell me and we'll have the stuff edited out. And of course, if you decide you don't want to say something here, just tell us that that's too personal. Sure. I'll remind you guys that our general philosophy in NCRAG is we don't go around asking people, how much money do you make? How many houses do you own? Things like that. That's just not our core philosophy here. But I think Jason is willing to share a bunch of that information tonight. But it's not normally acceptable to be going and introducing yourself saying, hey, so how many rental properties do you own? And then, I say, I own 100 or whatever it is. And then you guys are like, oh my gosh, you make so much money or whatever's going on like that. So, what's that? Yeah, is your mic on?
I assumed it was on when you handed it to me.
Oh, you probably should have put it in your pocket either because it might actually get weird.
You told me to put it in my pocket.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry about that. Well, I'm glad it's working now. So we didn't go through the whole interview with that. So that's basically what we're coming from. And, Jason is coming in from out of town. He has some property that he's buying here. But he's going to tell you his unique story about being able to acquire a bunch of properties, having gone through some pretty rough financial stuff. And when we did Brian's interview, it was interesting to hear Brian talk about some of his inner game and grit and his struggles and things like that. I think Jason has a very different perspective on this because I think Jason struggled, and you're first to admit it. You struggled a lot.
Oh yeah.
And so we're going to talk a lot about that tonight as well. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with what your first property in the second round is, and then we'll kind of jump back and do, kind of like some of your financial struggles? Or how about this? You actually lived here when? When was the last time you lived here?
I moved away from Colorado in December 2010.
Okay, so December of 2010. And you came to NCRAG long ago. We started NCRAG in 2003. When did you start coming to NCRAG meetings?
So I first met you when you were at the public library downtown was it November 5th, 2005.
How do you know the date?
I have a thing for dates.
So is Brian, by the way.
He's better at it than I am.
Yeah. Yeah, just in case you guys aren't aware of this, Brian actually celebrates weekly anniversaries with his significant other. He'll call me up and be like, hey, it is my 27th week anniversary with, yeah.
My best friend does that.
Yeah, well, he does too. He does. Oh, it's monthly.
Monthly.
Sorry.
It's still pretty impressive.
It is still pretty impressive. Okay, so basically you met us when? November 5th,
2005.
2005. So we started NCRAG in summer of 2003. I don't remember the exact date. I just know it was summer of 2003. And so you came in a year or two afterward. Is NCRAG different now than it was back then?
Yes.
Okay. What was it back then? Just for people to kind of take a walk down memory lane.
If you were doing a lot of ton of stuff on subject 2, you were doing a lot of stuff in regards to wholesaling. You weren't talking about the Nomad stuff that didn't exist yet in what you were teaching. I'd say 90% or better of what you were doing was subject to.
And it was because we were doing more of that. That's
Yeah.
what I was doing mostly at the time.
You know what?
And so we were
Actually,
sharing.
we informally go back a little bit further even.
Okay, tell me about that.
And I don't know if you want me to talk about Mammoth.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So in 2002, I was working at Amgen down in Longmont as a facilities guy. And I had gotten married. Wife wanted me to go back to college, finish my degree, all that stuff. And so when I started going to CSU, I needed a job. So I started selling advertising for the Fort Collins Forum. Have any of you been around here long enough to remember that? It was a direct mail monthly newspaper, distributed throughout the city. Paul, was that his name?
Yeah, Paul. Paul co-founded Craig with me.
And I somehow got a hold of Paul, and I pitched him on advertising in the newspaper, not for Craig, but for you actually going out finding motivated sellers to buy properties.
Yeah, we were aggressively buying properties and spending money on advertising. We were doing a ton of direct mail and a ton of newspaper advertising. We were advertising in American Classifieds, and I think we tried the Forum.
Yeah, you guys I think you bought like a half-page ad.
Yeah,
It
so
was
we were
pretty big ad space.
We were doing mostly large advertorial type content to get people, motivated sellers, primarily calling and buying houses from that. And so that's how you met Paul originally. But you didn't meet me at that point.
No, I didn't know you at the time. I wish I had.
And so basically, you came in November of
05.
And were you starting to do investing at that point? Did you own any houses?
Yeah, I had property already.
What'd you have?
I had a condo downtown, and wife and I at the time had a house over in Stone Ridge.
So you had two houses at the time? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had two houses, one you were living in and one you were renting?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah. And so how'd you find out about Craig?
The divorce had just finalized. And
is that how you remember the date?
Part of it. The divorce had just finalized, and I had nothing to do. And so my condo was in the brick building right across the street from the library downtown.
Like the Peterson condos?
On Peterson, yeah. Was it Park Lane something? And so I was living there temporarily. A tenant had moved out. I was living there temporarily, just for a place to live. And I had nothing to do, so I went over to the library to look for a book or pop online, something. And there was a sign that said, Northern Colorado Real Estate Investor Group. And I'm like, oh, okay, I've been a landlord for the past couple years and just converted it temporarily to owner-occ. I'm like, I have nothing better to do. And so I walked into the meeting room over there, and there was like 60 people in the room or something. It was insane.
That's an exaggeration. There were not 60 people in the room.
There was a lot of people. It was standing room only. And there was this dude talking about this crazy investing thing I had never heard of. And I'm like, wait, you just take over a loan? How does this work?
So let's talk about that for a minute. So you came in, and one of the things you were attracted to is this idea of buying properties subject to the existing financing, where you're able to buy a property with, in many cases, little or nothing down. And you were very obsessed with this idea for a long period of time.
2 years.
I think it was more than that.
3?
Well, I think it was even longer than that, in my opinion. But so you were obsessed for a very long period of time about little or nothing down. Do you still have that mindset where you're aggressively pursuing little or no money down type strategies, or have you grown beyond that, or what was the thinking there?
It's still an issue for me. Like, it's a mental hang-up.
Okay, by what? What do you mean?
Down payments.
So you
Closing costs.
You don't have down payments,
No,
or
I do now, but at the time, basically what became the running gag for several years is I was the guy at every NCREG meeting, every week, that would be like, okay, I get what you're talking about. I get it. But how do I get started with no money? I was that guy for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and I'd answer the question every single night,
Correct.
and then you'd keep asking the question.
Correct. Because I was either thick-headed, it didn't sink in, it didn't make sense. A lot of it, I think, was I just didn't have the belief pattern that it was possible, And it took. I have a lot of mental hang-ups about money, just because of my upbringing and everything. So it was just really hard for me to fathom getting started with no money, especially because I was low income. and it was just mind-boggling. Some of the deals he would talk about, you know, getting a house for X $100,000, and all he did was take over the payments. I'm like, you know, it just made. It made intellectual sense, but it didn't make emotional sense. I guess it was hard to filter that and just accept that it was possible.
So looking back from where you are now, which you have money to do down payments, you've acquired some properties, and you had a bankruptcy, you had some foreclosures, which we'll get to in a minute. But do you still like have a strong desire to do nothing down type deals now? Is that like
no?
You don't.
Not now.
Okay.
But it's because I'm in a different financial position.
So do you think your desire to do nothing down, no money down deals was because of your situation back then, your kind of financial situation?
Absolutely. When I had never made more than like 40 grand a year in my life, and you know, I had just gone through a divorce, and you know, I was married to somebody that was an engineer at HP, making 2.5 times as much money as I was. You know, so that whole beat down manliness thing, not being able to be a provider. I mean, I had a lot of hangups about all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, not to turn this into a shrink session.
Well, I mean, I think I think that there are some people out there that have similar belief patterns where
Sure.
they're struggling. They may not have high income, and they're looking for like little or no down type of situations. And like I think hearing you go through some of those struggles, and we're going to talk about some of the hard times you had, and kind of how you feel very differently now about those. So you prefer to do down payment type stuff now, is that right?
Now, but even 3 years ago, so it took you, what, 2 or 3 years, even after I was like financially okay and recovered from the bankruptcy and all that, it still took you a couple of years to kind of essentially convince me that, you can go buy a house now,
I want to come back to that. I do want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned me to convince you. So, no, you came to a meeting. We didn't know each other ahead of time. So how does somebody who comes to a meeting, has like no past experience, dealing with me or interaction with me, how do you get what I would consider to be relatively unprecedented access to me at this point, where you could call me up and have a 3-hour conversation with me, but it wasn't always that way? How do you go from coming to a class the first time to being able to call me and say, hey, I want to run like these ideas by you? Because early on, you couldn't pay me or anything like that. It wasn't like you were saying, hey, can I pay you money? Because you were struggling, I think, at that point. So how do you do that?
So I'm one of those people that I have a history of trying numerous get-rich-quick schemes. I've done my turn in the barrel with several network marketing companies. I have been to some of the Get Rich in Real Estate Weekend seminars before I ever met you. And so I had a natural disposition, I guess, towards that whole get-rich-quick world. And so basically what it boiled down to is I just started pestering you because what I saw, or what I interpreted actually, it's not what you were actually doing, but what I interpreted through like the first probably 6 months of classes was James is out doing this subject to thing and making money hand over fist, creating money out of thin air. I want to do that. I looked at it as a get-rich-quick scheme, even though it wasn't, and I know that now. But that's how I interpreted it. That, the part of my brain that was attracted to network marketing and stuff back in the day was drawn to, holy crap, I, can make $30,000 doing a subject to flip without doing the fix part, because you're buying pretty houses. I was like, oh, sign me up. And so I just started pestering you. And then it was probably, 1.5, 2 years in, we started doing the real estate mentoring calls or something, I think it was?
Yeah, so we ended up doing some calls together.
Yeah.
Because I was basically saying to you, hey, listen, we're on the phone anyway.
Yeah.
We should record these.
Yeah. And you were selling the CDs on like eBay and stuff. This was like before podcasting, And we did a wholesaling thing together for a little while. And it was always, I will fully own up to this, it was always my fault that they didn't go anywhere. I was the broken cog. I was the one that wasn't implementing. I was the one that wasn't following through. I was the one that lost interest in Like I remember Wholesaler Network, when we launched that nationwide, it was going to be a big wholesaling thing. And it flopped because of me. And I totally own up to that.
So how did you get access to James?
Yeah, so Dan said in the background off mic, so how do you get access to me? How does someone who comes in here... Yeah.
6 months, everybody.
Yeah.
But it's not I don't think it was a pestering thing, because I could totally remember people who come up to me after class and it's all about taking and very aggressively, I deserve this information, I'm demanding of this information, and that doesn't resonate with me. So what is the difference between you and how someone who's doing that?
I'll
What
be
did
honest,
you do?
I honestly don't remember, but at some point when doing some of these short joint venture stuff,
It was before this.
well, we became like genuine friends at some point. And it could be the military, the Navy background.
I think that was more for you than for me.
And it still is, actually.
I think that's true.
For those of you that don't know, Tammy, James, and myself, we were all nuclear power technicians in the Navy. And so, not at the same time, not together.
Tammy and I were together.
Yeah. I was about a year and a half behind you guys at Power School. But to me, that was like coming out of the Navy. I got out in 01, right before 9/11, and that was like still a huge part of my identity, even in 05, 06, 07.
Even today.
Yeah, to an extent, yeah.
So to answer Dan's question, I'll tell you the way I see it is how you get access to me. And Brian, I'd like to actually hear his kind of comment on this as well.
Well, you have a similar trajectory with the two of you, don't you?
I don't know if that's true, but
'Cause
let's
you
not
guys are BFFs now.
Let's not get derailed. But I think what it is it was an appreciation thing. I think in some ways it was clear to me that you were struggling and that it wasn't a money thing for me. I wasn't going to charge you for stuff. I wasn't going to do mentoring or charge you some money for that.
Well, I
But
wanted to mentor though.
You did. You did want to mentor, and I think what it was that you were appreciative, and that there's definitely people in this room that I sense they're super appreciative of the help, and they're like very thankful, and it's not a money thing, because there's an ongoing running joke with you and I and this joke originated by you. It's not like I'm saying it. What is the joke?
So I filed bankruptcy in 2008, and I actually listed him as a creditor on my bankruptcy to the tune of $35,000 in unpaid consulting fees for all the work he did me. There was no way for it to ever be collected on. I put it on there because my lawyer kept saying, any more creditors, any more creditors, any more creditors. And so I put on my ex-wife and him.
So apparently I'm worth $35,000 in consulting.
It's been a lot more than that by now.
I think that's...
'Cause that was 10 years ago even.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
And now that you're doing better financially, you've definitely given me some very nice birthday gifts and stuff like that. So this guy actually bought me probably, I don't know what it was, $3,000 massage chair or something like that.
Sure.
So he was just really grateful. I'd helped him a lot with his business and the real estate stuff. And for my birthday, he's like, hey, I'm going to send you your chair. Are you going to be around to take delivery of this thing? I'm like, all right, thank you. And he sent me this $3,000 crazy massage chair that my 22-year-old son sleeps in now. I wake up in the morning, I go downstairs, he's sleeping in the chair. I'm like, go to bed, dude. So anyway, he gets more use out of that than I do, but I do appreciate you doing that. And I think that goes a long way. It's just early on, you definitely could not afford to do anything like that.
No.
But now, you're definitely doing that. So you had bankruptcy in 2008. What caused your bankruptcy? Was it?
Hey, while you're on that.
Oh, wait a second. Hold on a second.
So, for clarity, you don't need to buy James a $3,000 or $5,000.
Decade later.
Right.
Yeah. So I think for both James and I, right, just the appreciation goes a long way, right? There are some people that buy us birthday presents or a Christmas card or whatever, and that's totally up to you and not necessary. I think just having the realization that the information that you can get in this class or from either of us about real estate or Amazon or whatever isn't just oh, hey, you could get this anywhere. It's the realization that you could go pay $40,000 for the same information you can come here and get for free or listen to the podcast, right? And we've had people that have come here who've paid $40,000 for Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and they're like, I learned way more here in 6 months, right? And I'm touting the horn a little bit, but I think it's just the realization that it's not that you're just asking a question. It's like when you go to an attorney and you ask a question, you're not getting an answer that they just went and looked up and it took them 5 minutes. You're getting an answer of their 20 years of experience, and that's what you're paying for, right? That's why attorneys are so damn expensive. But it's the same here, right? It's just the genuine appreciation, I think, for us goes a really long way, right? And so, you know, you don't have to buy I'm trying to be clear, right? You don't have to like, buy a $3,000 massage chair, although I don't have one. Just kidding. And I don't want one because the thing is giant. But I think that goes further than anything in being respectful of, you know, time and what you ask for and how you ask for. And, you know, if you were here when I taught, it was our the best class of the year, arguably the best class of the year. I taught a 15-minute segment on how to ask someone to be your mentor, which the answer is don't. Bring something to the relationship that actually makes you want to partner with that person, right? Are you moving in for the shot? Tammy is taking pictures. But I think that's the key, right? And there are people that are no longer coming to NCRITE because they came once or twice, and they come up at the end and they're like, hey, would you be my mentor? I'm like, no, I don't know you. Like, you're asking, and you don't even know if I'm doing what you're wanting to do. Like, have some thought, put some thought into it. You don't need a mentor. You need to, like, bring as much as you're getting from the relationship to other people, and that makes a good partnership. And then you'll learn all sorts of things, right? I think that's the answer.
I'll second that, because in my primary, was now my primary business, I do this in a completely different field, okay? I teach classes, I hold seminars, I'm in a completely different field. And it's the same thing. People come up after a seminar, or the thing that bugs me the most is when they corner me on breaks. So I do like a 2-3 day seminar, and I don't like speaking. Okay, I don't like public speaking. I have like social anxiety, blah, blah, blah. But I'm a professional public speaker, believe it or not. And when people corner me on breaks, I get a little uppity because I'm like, dude, I just spoke for 2 hours. I need to go recharge. Okay, leave me the freak alone. Okay, and it really, I told you I'd watch my language.
Thank you.
And it really pisses me off when people come up and...
It's okay, you can swear here. You cannot swear here, it's on a podcast.
And it just ticks me off when people come up and like, hey, one quick question that takes 30 minutes.
That's like the next section, like the 2-hour class segment.
Yeah, and I just, as a speaker, I hate it. But the people that at the end of the day, all they do is they come up and say, hey, I really appreciate you doing this. I learned a lot. I look forward to listening to the recordings. I look forward to your other emails. You know, all this like content marketing stuff that I do. When they reference one of those things that I do that I don't charge money for, I'm like, thank God there's somebody listening. You know, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the appreciation goes a long way.
It does.
Hey, so let's kind of get off that for now, because I want to talk about your real estate stuff. So what caused you to go bankrupt in 2008?
Stupidity.
Okay, talk about it. I mean, what was stupid?
So there's parts of it I don't want to talk about, but you and I were actually at Keller Williams together. So I had transitioned. I'd gotten a real estate license. I had no real career at that point in my life.
Do you want to talk about? You sent me an email recently that had numbers from Social Security on it. You want to talk about that?
So you know, you can pull up your Social Security benefit statement every year. I pulled mine last week or 2 weeks ago. I hadn't looked at it in forever. And I look back all the way to 1993 when I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school. My first job was building houses in the neighborhood that I lived in. You know, I was on just, you know, sweeping floors, you know, doing touch-up paint, just whatever odd jobs for, was it $5.75 an hour or whatever.
So let's summarize the Social Security. Let's not go through job history.
Oh, okay. So over the course of 20 years, I never made more than 40 something a year, and I'd go 3,000, 0, 9,000, 0, 20,000, like was my peak year in the Navy. The year after that, like $2,000 for my annual income. So just
I'll make a comment about Jason here. So Jason, I would consider you to be one of the smarter IQ guys that I know. I mean, you like to go dig into, you know, tax law and, if we ever have a question about whether the legality of something or how something works, you like to dig in and really grasp the like finer details.
He's calling me a nerd.
And summarize. You are super nerdy, and you like doing that stuff. But I will say, actually, let me ask you. So I think really high IQ, but what do you think about your EQ? Yeah. So EQ is emotional intelligence, and so I think part of it is, and there's a stigma about depression and mental health and stuff like that. Do you struggle with some mental health type issues of not being motivated and feeling depressed and blue and not wanting to work and things like that?
Yeah, I mentioned the social anxiety. And I don't want to. That's a road I really don't want to go down. Sure. But yeah, I've struggled with depression issues. I've had tumultuous relationship issues related to some of my mental issues. Yeah, it's definitely an issue, and I have a very difficult time feeling like I am part of our species.
So fitting in. That's another way of saying it. So do you think some of the EQ stuff, the emotional kind of intelligence aspect, the lack of commitment to steady work and wanting to contribute in a lot of ways to a regular thing, because you're always looking for the get rich quick aspect of it. You're always kind of trying to find a 4-hour work week type job where you could make $1 million, but not like work full time. And I think you finally, after a very long period of time, established a business, but it was only after you put in a lot of effort up front to generate this business, and now it's sort of coasting where you can decide to do 4-hour work weeks. And kind of do
that. No, I mean, I did 4-hour work week stuff even after the bankruptcy. So, I mean.
But before the bankruptcy, was it a contributing factor, do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So this idea of get rich quick and going after these things, it basically, in a lot of ways, contributed to your bankruptcy. You were not willing to go out and get a $40,000 a year job just to kind of dig your way
I saw us working together at KW as, I'll just make $500,000 in real estate commissions the first year.
So was it easy to do that?
No. Especially in the year in which the real estate meltdown occurred. Okay.
Sure.
And I had other real estate related stupidity. I had my own issues. I was still not emotionally recovered from the divorce, even though it was like 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So yeah. Long story short, I'm the guy that lived in a van down by the river.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So I've been saying that he lived in a car down by the river. Where did you actually live? You lived in Fort Collins?
So well, first of all, it was not the first time in my life that I had lived in my car.
And let me make a comment before you continue your story. So this is a recurring conversation he and I have a lot on the phone, is that he seems to think that it is okay as a fallback position to say, hey, listen, well, if this doesn't work, I know I can live in my car down by the river. I've done it before. It's okay to do that. And I think a lot of the inner game stuff you and I work on is me trying to convince you that you need to raise your standards. You need to actually say.
Correct. Well, we'll get to that with the new construction property.
Okay.
So I grew up single mother, moving state to state, looking for work wherever she could. My mom worked her ass off to put food on the table and a roof over my head. Okay. I will never ever fault her for her work ethic and all that. But there were periods of time when, as a child, lived in the car. There was a 6-month period where the Navy forgot to keep paying me. Oh, you don't know this? Oh, yeah. DFAS stopped payroll.
A bridge story.
I spent 6 months living in my car in Charleston at Prototype.
By the way, Jason also suffers from ADD. He's like squirrel. Next thing you know, 15 minutes later, he's going to be telling you the story about him in the Navy. And so I'm trying to keep him on track so that we have time to do the real estate stuff. Because otherwise, we'll
That'll
have
take
all
5
this.
minutes, dude.
Yeah.
And so basically, long story short, I'm 40 years old. I've spent a total of about 4.5 years living in vehicles, not consecutively, but in multi-month periods.
And so this ongoing conversation, though, we're not proud of this fact. We're trying to establish you to have a higher level, and you should be sort of like, that was good that I was able to do that back then, but I'm disappointed that I was not willing to live at a higher level.
In some ways, yes, but there's still always going to be a part of my mentality that views it, no matter what he says, that views it as an acceptable fallback. last year, because as you keep telling me, I'm now affluent.
Which you are.
Last year, I bought a $40,000 Winnebago motorhome.
Which was a mistake.
Which was a mistake.
He asked me ahead of time. I told him, don't do it.
Now he can live in a Winnebago down by the river.
So Brian basically says he raised the standards so he can live in a Winnebago down by the river.
He did exactly what you asked him.
Yeah, that was not what I was trying to tell him. I told him, don't do that. Hold on a second. Brian wants you.
Lesson for James there is when speaking with someone who has ADD, make sure you're making it very clear that the standard is not a Winnebago, it's a house.
All right, well played.
So, so a lot of things contributed to bankruptcy. I ended up getting a job at a company in the Denver area doing something that I had never done before. I was working full-time at it's called a tax resolution company. And then also, just in order to put food on the dashboard, literally, I was also moonlighting, doing tax returns at a Jackson Hewitt kiosk at the Super Walmart over on Mulberry on weekends and evenings, okay? So I was working 60, 70 hours a week in the tax field, something that I just kind of stumbled into because I had a friend here in Fort Collins that had just gotten a job at the same tax res company and said they're expanding, they need somebody. Long story short, I lived in my car that stint for about 10 months. That was my longest period ever. Lost the properties, foreclosure, bankruptcy. But I finally started a career. And it's still the field that I'm in. And then I worked at a company for 2.5 years, went into private practice. And after 10 months, I built my private practice up enough where I could work remotely, and then I spent almost 3 years traveling around the world constantly.
Can you dig into how you got started? Because there sounds like
Yeah, we're gonna
With the
get
real
started
estate?
with the real estate. Oh, really? Sure, we could probably dig a little bit into that. So
you went from not knowing taxes to
no, he knew taxes. He was kind of interested in those. You were digging into them.
Okay, if you really want, it's a Navy story.
Yeah, so the short version of the Navy story, I'll tell it, is he ended up doing tax returns for sailors while he was in the Navy because they didn't have help or something like that, and they would all come down there and he'd do the taxes. And so he had some history there. It wasn't like a brand new sort of career. But you're right, there was great.
It was only 3 months worth.
And it was getting traction on something that he wanted to do, and I
Right.
think that's true.
Very different.
It is. It's very different.
Very
yes.
different. And the thing is now 10 years later, I'm one of the country's most well-known and respected experts in IRS collections representation.
A really small niche, but he's like a superstar in it.
Yeah, it's a teeny, tiny field of accounting and tax law, but I'm like one of the dudes.
Yeah. Which is great. It's super impressive. And that's the business you were able to kind of restart and do that.
Yeah.
So you had this bankruptcy. Was the bankruptcy and foreclosure, they go together?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically they're at the same time?
Yeah, Washington Mutual foreclosed on April 30th, 2008. I filed bankruptcy April 31st.
Okay.
almost such a nice bank.
Yeah, I know.
Well, when you don't make payments, they want the property back.
Yeah. And then built a career, did the Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week thing, making okay money while I was representing clients. And then I came back to the United States on June 22nd, 2014.
So that was what, 6 years later almost?
Yeah.
So once you filed bankruptcy and you had your foreclosure, did you think at the time that you were eventually going to own real estate again?
No.
Okay, so you were
I
like
thought I was done.
You thought you were done?
I thought I was done, and I said I will never go in debt again. I will never utilize the credit system. FICO can shove it.
Okay.
I extracted myself from the system.
So you used debit cards at that point?
No, I was well, debit cards and very heavily cash. Some of those kind of fly-by-night kind of card systems that are out there, don't use them. But I was traveling internationally. I needed something.
Okay, and then so 6 years later, you came back to the United States. When did you start to get the desire to own real estate again? And when did you start improving your credit? So what about that story?
So in 2014, I was living in Sydney, Australia, and I had about 40 grand in my name. And it was
Which is quite a bit for 6 years starting back over from zero.
It was
living
more,
in your car.
Yeah, and it was from doing tax resolution work and stuff, and I had a nice little business doing that.
And were you doing like crazy full time? I know at the very beginning you were doing 60-hour work weeks to just get crazy, but
no, most
after
of
a
my
couple
time
years-
overseas, I was 20-hour work week kind of thing.
And that was for the last couple of years of that. And is that where you made most of the money? Because it wasn't
When
the
I started,
60-hour
yeah,
stuff, right?
yeah.
It was sort of just getting back
Yeah.
to zero.
So I was, big fan of the Tim Ferriss stuff. I'm a huge. He's not as big into it, but I am.
Well, I'll comment on the Tim Ferriss stuff. Just you guys have never heard me talk about Tim Ferriss before. He has a book. It's called The 4-Hour Workweek. It's one of his first books. I think it was his first book.
It was.
And my philosophy, my argument for Tim Ferriss all the time was, why do a 4-hour work week and make a certain amount of money? Why not do 10 times as much work 40 hours and make 10 times as much money? So that was always my kind of argument with Tim.
And if you listen to current Tim Ferriss interviews, that's what he says was his original message. I interpreted the book at face value.
So do a lot of other people.
Yes.
It's not just you.
And there are pros and cons to it, by the way, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
That's right.
So I came back in 2014. A couple other guys in the tax world that did seminars and stuff, they convinced me to come back to the States and do a 42-city speaking tour. And so that's where my seminar business started. Was 2014. At the same time, I was making a higher income than I ever had in my life before, and I was doing great. And I had a great life overseas. I was kind of living the dream, to speak, but I wasn't building wealth at all.
So you were like starting to think about retirement. How old were you at that point?
I was 35.
You were 35. You realized that Social Security was not going to do it for you with your work history.
Correct.
Right.
I didn't have the work history to ever get full Social Security.
And you didn't have any savings for retirement. You had already gone through that before the bankruptcy.
Correct.
So you were basically.
I had the 40 grand in the bank, and that was it, in my income, and nothing else.
Okay. And so when did you start saying, hey, I need to start planning for this?
It was while I was in Sydney during
While you're in Sydney.
during the spring of 2014. Came back to the States.
When did you realize that you were going to buy real estate specifically? Do you remember?
It wasn't until after the second divorce. So I guess I will talk about it. I said I wasn't, but I will. So anybody ever heard of Burning Man? So So I've been several times, and I was like, okay, I'll be back in the States for 2014. I'll make it a burn year. So I went to Burning Man.
The short version.
Met a girl, married her, like a few weeks later. Okay.
This is the EQ part of this.
Correct. Divorce was finalized December 31st, same year. Okay. Very short marriage. I had already rented my apartment in the Seattle area by that time. I had made a decision. I prefer weather that is cold, dark, and wet. Okay. Huge Twilight fan, by the way. So go Team Bella. Squirrel. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go live. I was like, I actually seriously thought about living in Forks.
Living where?
Forks.
What is Forks?
That's where Twilight takes place. I thought about it. But I was like, nah, I need to be closer to Seattle. So I lived like an hour and a half away from Forks, but I visited frequently. And I was like, okay, I'm going to open a traditional tax office. I'm going to do tax returns, all that stuff. I started that business. I did 92 tax returns in the month of February.
Refocus.
And I said, forget this. I then went and visited your son in Arizona.
Refocus.
And then I was like, okay, I've got this other business that's doing okay. What else am I going to do? So I started a software company.
Okay, so to answer the question, when did you start thinking about buying the house again? When did you start thinking
It was after I started the software company, and I realized I was getting there, dude. And then I was looking at the financial commitment of personally bootstrapping a tech startup in Seattle, especially with an idea that I know would never fly in Silicon Valley and get the big VC capital. And I'm like, this still isn't going to get me to the wealth phase. And also, I checked my credit for the first time in years, and my credit had improved.
So how did you check your credit? For people that have had a bankruptcy or foreclosure, like what were your steps? Because you did a ton of research on this.
I did.
And I think you'd be helpful for people that have had this experience. So where did you check your credit?
So I went straight to the source. I signed up for it was like $50, $60 a month. For the FICO.com, their direct 3-bureau full bore program. So it's expensive.
So I didn't realize that. So you actually paid the service? I thought you went to like the free service and you were tracking it yourself. Okay.
No, I went straight to FICO.com again. I think it was like 50 or 60 bucks a month. And I started, because as he already mentioned, I geek out, I go overboard. It's another EQ thing. When I do latch onto something, I go deep into it, okay? And so I made a semi-professional study of credit repair and credit monitoring. I became very, very active on the myfico.com forums. Very, very good group. If you want to look at your credit education, go there, and that's all you need, okay?
So if you had to recommend something for someone who had a bankruptcy or foreclosure or has some credit challenges now, you'd recommend they become active on like myfico.com. myfico.com on the discussion forums there.
Amazing resource.
And they have some great resources, and it's a forum for people trying to improve their
Correct.
credit.
Okay. And if you don't want to sign up for a paid service, there is
Credit Karma is the one that I think is pretty.
But their numbers are wrong.
Yeah, but it's actually a way to measure.
True. If you have a credit card, a lot of credit card companies will now give you your FICO score.
I heard those are off as well.
Those are also wrong.
Yeah. So the other thing to do is once a year you can request a copy of your own credit report. It doesn't give you a score, but you can do that once a year for each of the 3 credit bureaus.
Right. So the tip is every 4 months you pull one.
Yeah. So
From
it kind of
what was it, annualcreditreport.com, I think?
I think it's annualcreditreport.com.
Yeah, and it's free, mandated by Congress. So every 4 months, pull Experian. 4 months later, pull TransUnion. 4 months later, pull Equifax.
So what did you do to start improving your credit? Did you get a credit card? Because you swore off credit. So what did you do?
Yeah, so I had to get a credit card. It's pretty easy to get an entry-level Capital One card if you're at least 2 years post-bankruptcy. I got one of those. And then I started applying left and right for credit, which they generally don't recommend. But I wanted to rebuild my credit portfolio as rapidly as possible. And especially because even after my bankruptcy, about two years after my bankruptcy, I had a truck, got hit. I didn't have gap insurance. And I had like $4,000 short on the loan that got written off. So even after my bankruptcy, I still had a negative hit.
So were you struggling financially at the time? Why didn't you pay the $4,000?
That was when I was still as an employee.
Okay.
In Broomfield, and so I didn't have the money to pay it.
Okay, so you basically said, "Hey, I'm going to take this additional hit even beyond my bankruptcy."
And I also thought, "Oh, I'm never going to use credit again. Screw it."
At the time, so you were just like writing it off.
Yeah.
So you went and started improving your credit, and you decided you were going to buy a house. When did you decide, hey, listen, I really am buying a house. I'm going to start looking, and became serious about it?
Well, I pestered you a few times at one point.
Yeah, so actually, let's talk about that. So we've talked about this on and off for a very long period of time. I mean, early on, before the bankruptcy, there was tons of conversations about it, and then after the bankruptcy, I remember times when we discussed this at length, and this is that example of, sometimes you had unprecedented access to me where I'd stay on the phone with you for 3 hours, which is not normal, by the way.
Yeah.
And part of it's the squirrel stuff. I mean, an hour of...
You do a little bit of it yourself.
No doubt. I am totally squirrel guy.
To be fair, part of it is that you guys both talk a lot about like your
business stuff.
Other business outside.
Or other businesses,
Sure.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not 3 hours of him. Yeah.
We geek out about marketing stuff a lot.
That's true.
Right. So I believe it was probably fall of 2014 or so when we were talking, and you mentioned this Nomad thing. That's where it started.
So I don't remember the date, and I have the date as to when we came up with Nomad because there's an email about it.
Okay.
But I don't remember the exact date. But so it was around 2014, according to you, that we started talking about this.
Yeah, well, 'cause
serially
you
buying
had a
properties.
conversation with somebody else that's Roy. Was it Royce?
Yeah, it was a Royce conversation. It was actually Royce and Brian.
Was it? Okay. And then you kind of looped me in on pieces of the conversation like a couple months later or something, and you were like, you just buy as an owner occupant and then wait a year and rent it out, and I'm like, I could do that. That's not like overwhelming.
Yeah. And at the time, were you think back in 2014? Where were you financially? Were you recovered? Were you thriving?
I was recovered and I was doing well. but nowhere near what I am at today.
Do you remember about what you had in savings at the time?
That's what I said. I had $40,000.
That was $40,000 in 2014?
Yeah.
Okay, and so with $40,000 in savings, you've kind of given
But
yourself.
that's all I had. I was
Right.
not willing to put it as a down payment on a property.
Fair
It was
enough.
my emergency fund. It was my nest egg. I clung on to that cash like you would not believe.
Yeah, and he hasn't worked consistently, and he was in business for himself, and so there's additional risk there.
Mm-hmm.
And you live extremely frugally. I will say that one good thing about you.
I'll talk about that if you want.
Yeah, I would like to hear about that in a second. But I think the idea is that you had this $40,000, and you wanted to have, if case something happened, you'd be able to not go back to your car, which I totally agree with. I think
Correct.
that you
And
have
that
the
was part of the conversation at the point was, and you were encouraging me not to put it into Prolera, my software company,
Right.
and you were encouraging me not to sink it into a down payment on a house.
Right.
Because I was living in an apartment in Washington, and you were like, keep the apartment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd rather see you living in an apartment
Right.
than in your car.
Right.
And then even when you could have put a full down payment down, I think we talked about not doing a full 20%. Didn't we have that conversation?
Well, so when I bought my first house, so I made the offer in, I want to say it was May of 2015.
Okay. How long were you looking for a house before you found it?
Like,
it wasn't here, by the way.
No, this was in a Navy town in the Puget Sound area, and I'd been looking for like 2 or 3 months, kind of haphazardly. I kept going back to you, James, do I really want to do this? Kind of being a whiny little crybaby, reflecting my low EQ thing, and basically you just. I mean, let's be honest, you kind of coddled me through it. I mean, you did.
I'm not disagreeing.
Because I was so unsure of myself and so unsure of everything.
And I'll tell you, you are not like super unusual in that way. I think there's a lot of folks, a lot of clients that they want someone who can just talk to them about what could go wrong, what could go right, what's the risk, what's the kind of upside to it. A lot of what I think Brian's going to teach in his EV class, where he talks about evaluating risk. But I think it's just conversations like that. And I didn't, like, I don't remember teaching, like telling you everything's going to be rosy and it's all going to be perfect.
No, but it was like, okay, remember, he's a real estate agent here, not in Washington State, okay? And he couldn't help me, but he was giving me the level of service that he will give you if you are a client of his here locally. He was doing the same exact thing for me during, actually, really all of my purchases so far, okay? Even though the house I'm closing on in a month is the first one he's earning a commission on, okay? He was still willing to do that, which is a testament to you and your commitment to helping people.
And the power of the massage chair.
And the power of the massage chair. And so, like, I was trying to find a real estate agent, and you didn't have anybody you could refer me to out there, and so you gave me a litmus test. And this is what I did. To find my real estate agent, I went through and contacted a bunch of people that had posted on Craigslist, and I ultimately hired as my buyer's agent the one person that actually bothered to reply.
That is not my litmus test, by the way.
No,
That just
no.
That is not my criteria.
No, but it was part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Because because a lot of real estate agents just don't respond. I'm giving you a lead. Why aren't you following up with your leads? And I'm like, it indicates what the future process will look like. Okay, and that's what we talked about.
Yeah, so tell me about the condition of the house and the price of the house that you bought first.
So I went looking for a rough property, and which are a dime a dozen in towns that were built during World War II, in an entire city built in 6 months to support the war effort. Okay, which is where I lived. Bremerton, yes, Bremerton. And so I was looking at a lot of these World War II houses. I didn't want to spend more than $150,000.
So what was so special about $150,000?
It was just an imaginary threshold that would produce a mortgage that was so small that even if I had to only rely on, it was a duplex. If I only had to rely on the cash flow from the other side, I would still be okay and could pay the mortgage.
So
that was my criteria.
You were like house hacking. You were looking for a
Yes.
property where you could have income
Yes.
coming in to cover the other part of the property.
Yes. So my agent out there was getting sick and tired of me driving around, and the market there was just starting to heat up. We were catching the overflow from Seattle. And so prices were just starting to nudge up. It's gone crazy now. And then, nope. And then.
What do you mean by nope? They didn't accept your offer?
No, I kept going house to house and going, nope, not this one, nope, not this one. I did make an offer that got refused. I ended up in a bidding war on one, and I refused to play that game because all that does is jack up the price. And then we were just out driving around. She was frustrated as heck. She got a little thing on her phone saying that a property just came up on the MLS. She says, it's a duplex for $145. You want to go look at it? Yes, let's go. We went. I looked at it, made an offer on the spot. Full price.
What did I tell you about the condition of the properties you were looking at? Because you sent me some over.
Yeah. And you kept telling me, don't buy a rough property.
And why did I tell you that?
Fix up Nomad. The numbers aren't as good, first of all. And then also, if you're going to take on a project and you're not, I mean, you're in construction, right? So you can go do that. I mean, I was an electrician in the Navy 15 years ago, right? I'm not the kind of person to be swinging a hammer. I'm just not. And so, and actually, I think you taught it, I'm pretty sure, the CapEx class. It's a great class if you haven't listened to it. CapEx, the silent killer or something like that. It's a great class.
And you still bought the property?
And I still bought the property. You hadn't taught it yet.
He didn't listen to the class.
And so, but what in my head, the reason I thought it was okay is because I was using a VA loan. And if you use VA or FHA financing, the organization has what are called minimum property requirements, MPRs. Okay, and so the appraiser acts as a pseudo inspector. Okay.
Yeah, pseudo.
Correct. And so they evaluate the property against the MPRs, and it won't go through underwriting if you don't meet the MPRs. I was like, that's my ace in the hole. I'm okay, because I'll meet the MPRs.
That is not okay, by the way.
Okay. Several $1,000s later.
Yeah, so you bought a property that needed a lot of work.
It didn't need a lot of work.
It still needs work.
What are you talking about?
The property, it still is.
Well, the one side. So the first house, so I closed August 8th of 2015. The 2-bedroom, 1 bath on one side, 1 bedroom, 1 bath on the other side, oversized lot, 2 detached garages. Okay.
Tell them about why you wanted oversized lot. What was the thinking behind that? Yeah, I think you told me at one point I could always park my car on the one side and have someone living in the
it was
unit.
actually, okay, you guys know about tiny houses? Yeah. Okay. My thought process was the lot was deep enough that I could park a tiny house on the back side of the lot.
An RV.
And basically make it a triplex. After I bought the house, I even went to the county and asked about zoning and asked if I could bulldoze the kind of shaky detached workshop and build a 3rd unit on it. I even went that far, and they said no.
So the property was rough.
It was rough.
It still is rough today.
So the 2-bedroom side, I acquired a tenant that was already living there, had lived there for 6 years. He's now been there for 9, 10. He's my affordable housing guy.
Is he under market rent?
Oh, he's paying $800 a month right now. I could probably get $1,300 for that unit.
Yeah. So this is part of the problem too, right?
Right. He's a good guy. He works for.
Doesn't matter.
I know. He works for a charity.
Nor should you disclose his
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you basically bought a house that needed a lot of work for your first house. You moved in there. You lived there for how long?
I lived in the 1-bedroom side for a year and 3 months. I put about 10 grand into, most of it was flooring, because the flooring was shot.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. So you were really attracted to a nothing down loan program, the VA loan program.
That was huge to me.
Okay, so that was huge to you.
Using my VA loan benefits was huge.
And then Then you proceeded to put $10,000 out of your own pocket into repairs on the property that you could not finance.
Correct.
If you had just put 3% down on a pretty house that did not need those repairs.
Don't forget also, I rolled the VA funding fee into the loan.
Yeah, so basically you finance that too.
Correct.
Which is high. VA funding fee is high, but VA still is a great loan. Even if you run the
2%?
numbers on it with the funding fee, the numbers are amazing usually. So you basically decided to put more than you would have put in a regular down payment to repair a house that was kind of run down.
Correct. And I also wanted the workshop. That was important to me for hobby stuff that I never ended up doing anything with. I wanted to be outside the city limits. The house is literally half a block outside the city line, so I didn't have to get a landlord license once I, so I mean, it had a lot going for it at the time.
Yeah. In retrospect, would you buy that same house?
Yes.
Okay. So you'd keep that one?
Despite what he says.
Which is fine. And we don't always agree. Clients don't always agree. Sometimes I'll tell them something and they say, no, I know better. And sometimes they do. They make a decision and it works out remarkably well.
And here's what I'll say. Between the two units, even with the discounted rent for the one dude, I still positive cash flow $900 a month between the two units. And if I ever end up in dire straits again, my default is no longer to go live in my car.
Thank good. That's applause, actually.
My default is to go live back in the one bedroom side because as long as I have a tenant up front, I'm okay.
That's a big victory.
Okay.
That's awesome.
And now you have a place to park your Winnebago.
Yeah, now
I sold the Winnebago in April, actually.
For a loss?
I took about a $7,000 bath on it.
So why would you still?
Wait a second. Question.
Why would I still buy it?
Why would you still buy this property? You bought it for $150. What's it worth today, if you want to disclose that? And why would you still buy it? Is it just because it's worth a lot more today?
Well, appreciation is definitely an issue. It's in Washington State, they base property taxes on full fair market value, no deductions or anything like that. The current assessment's $230. And I paid $140. Well, if you include the funding fee, call it $150. Would I buy it again? Yes. Because the cash flow.
So you'd buy it for a cash flow?
Correct.
Because it has
beautiful cash flow.
So let's actually talk about cash flow for a minute. So you say it has $900 a month positive cash flow.
I know exactly what you're going to talk about.
Okay, so you
I
say
know where
it's
you're going.
$900 a month in positive cash flow. I will come back to you. So how do you've seen how I teach deal analysis. You've seen how Brian teaches deal analysis.
I've taught deal analysis with you.
So how do you do deal analysis differently than what we do? What do you not include?
I do deal analysis the exact same way that James does, except for the maintenance allowance.
So you use a vacancy allowance?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, he's 5%.
And what do you use for maintenance? Nothing. You use zero.
Yeah.
So he doesn't.
But I have a reason. I have a reason.
Okay. What's the reason for not including maintenance?
So. Oh, are you going to blast me on this too? Okay. So my theory is.
We've spent years teaching.
Yeah, I know. So here's the way I look at it. Okay. A maintenance reserve that you include in the rent and you set aside the money and the fund builds up. Okay. The way I look at it is, I have the money just to set aside the money. So I just set aside the money.
But that's not the reason we do it. And I think we've talked about it before.
I know.
So different properties have different maintenance percentages.
Correct.
And you're trying to run numbers estimating what you think the maintenance on that property will be.
Correct.
Some properties are going to be 15, 16, 17%. Some of them are going to be 8%. Most of them are probably going to be in that 10 to 12% range.
I don't include it because I look at if I have a major repair expense, it is simply an additional investment that I have to make into the property. I don't view it as a monthly expense I need to account for.
Right. And so I think if you're going to do it that way, if you're going to set aside $10,000, you just need to include that in your initial investment into the property. And then when maintenance actually gets pulled out, you need to account for maintenance and then put another additional investment into the property. And your numbers are not going to be the same.
Correct. And I recognize that now. I didn't 3 years ago. So if I was going to buy the property again, I would evaluate it differently based on what you just said. Absolutely.
All right, we have a question. One second.
Oh, it's just a question for you. When you say pretty houses versus fixer-upper, just in very short, what do you mean by a pretty house? When you say you should invest in pretty house versus
Yeah, so houses that do not need repair. They're ready to move in. They don't have any deferred maintenance at all.
Minor
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very minor stuff.
So the guy that's been in the other side of my duplex for 10 years now almost, he's, I'm not going to say anything. Thanks for the reminder on that. When he moves out, I'm probably going to have to sink 20 or 30 grand into rehab.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of rough on it.
Okay. So you bought that house. You lived there for a year and 3 months.
Yep.
What did you buy next, and when and how?
I bought another house that you didn't, that was not James Orr approved. And so,
Actually, pause for a second. So let's talk about that. So there is a recurring theme between you and I.
Correct.
About you seeking something in particular from me. What are you constantly trying to seek?
Approval.
Yeah.
It's part of my low EQ thing he talked about. I have approval-seeking behavior. Okay, I always have.
Which is dangerous, and we've talked about this.
I agree.
You should not be seeking approval.
No. So second house, I went looking for something less than 200,000. So I bumped up a little bit. I wanted a single family because I had a dog by this time, and I wanted her to have, a yard and be able to roam and whatever. And I don't like living with other people. I'm kind of a loner. So I wanted a single family. So what I did is I bought the roughest house in the most desirable working class neighborhood in Bremerton. That's what I bought. Okay. The house was actually owned by like a holding company or something like that based here in Colorado. And I don't know the full story, but somebody had owned it and they passed away, and then the company here in Colorado bought it out of the estate or something like that.
Let's refocus. So basically, you bought this house. What did you put down on it?
Nothing.
So you bought another house with a VA loan.
Correct.
So little known fact.
Yes.
You have VA benefits that you could use more than once. It's a dollar amount. It is not a number of houses amount.
Correct.
So in this case, because he was buying houses that were relatively low, he was able to buy 2 properties using both VA loans. He still had the old VA loan. He bought another one with a VA loan and put 0 down. Did you finance your funding fee on this one?
Yes.
Okay, so you financed the funding fee as well, which is a pretty steep fee.
For secondary entitlement, the funding fee is even higher.
Yeah.
It's about 3/4 of a point.
Okay,
higher.
So you basically bought that property, and then you moved into that one?
Yep.
And you lived there?
Yep.
What did you rent the one you left out of? What did you rent it for?
$895. The one
unit?
bedroom.
And then what's the other side rented for?
$750 now, $800.
So
I rented the one bedroom after I put in new flooring and appliances. The one bedroom was renting for more than the 2 bedroom.
Okay, so basically you got a almost 1% rule. If you figure you probably put 10K plus a little extra in there.
Yeah.
And the other one needs more than that, so it's a little less than the 1% rule when you factor in that the one side's going to need at least 20,000 repairs.
Yeah, that's something that's the CapEx killer.
Okay. So you moved into the new property, put 0% down on that one.
Yep.
You're getting good positive cash flow on the other one. What did you say your cash flow on?
About 900 right now.
For some reason, those numbers don't make sense to me.
What is it?
900. You think his cash flow on 900 on 1,700 a month income.
Well, the new tenant's paying 1050 on the.
Okay, I'll have to run numbers.
Total rent's 1850. Mortgage is 959. Okay. And then I pay.
What about taxes and insurance?
That 959 includes PITI.
Okay.
And then 10% for property management now.
Yeah, those numbers don't make
Since
sense.
I'm not there anymore.
You're not at 900.
Yeah.
Not by your math, probably.
Well, not even, which is what you said.
Okay.
Yeah. So here, what I want to point out about this is the problem when you come to an investor club meeting and people are telling you their numbers, right? If we come in here and you just said, Jason said, hey, listen, I am making $900 a month cash flow on my property, and you're looking at all the properties you're buying around here, and you're thinking to myself, there's no way I'm getting 900. I should go to Bremerton. And that is not the correct answer to this question. So you got to actually understand how people are doing their math, and some people don't do their math correctly. And I would argue, and I have not looked at his numbers. He's a smart guy, but I suspect his math is wrong.
My advice: this is don't do what I do as he says. Seriously, do the full proper NOI calculation the way he teaches it. Okay.
Well, I think some of it's assumptions, and some of it is how you're doing your math.
Yeah.
You know, like what you're including in it, what you're not including in it.
So this is not limited to what he's saying. This is across the board.
Yes.
Talking to others.
Yes, this is not. Anytime you go to an investor meeting and you're talking to somebody about properties, and they say to you, "I'm getting $200 a month positive cash on a property I just bought," you really need to dig into their numbers because they may not be including vacancy, maintenance, property management, all these other things that people tell you, because you could feel really horrible about yourself. You're like, why didn't I find this great deal where I'm getting $200 a month? And if everyone does the math the same, you'll find that the deals are much closer.
Yeah.
Wait, Brian.
And it's not just other people you meet. It's actually other people in the industry. Like other people that are working in jobs where real estate is their full-time job and they're doing other things related to real estate. And they're literally, I rent it for $2,000, my mortgage is $1,200, I make $800 cash flow a month. And you're like, you don't. Like, that's not what your tax return is going to say.
All right, so you moved it to the new property, and I assume you had positive cash flow on the other one. I'm not doubting that. I just don't think it's $900.
So the second house I bought December 16th, 2016. $180,000 rolled in funding fee, so $185 all told. Mortgage is $1,190-ish, so $1,200.
Seems in the ballpark.
Yeah, and it's rented now for $1,450.
Did you, when you bought these properties, were you getting discounts? Were you paying full retail?
Full retail, off the on MLS.
Okay, so you didn't feel like you were getting them at a discount, but you had some good appreciation there. In the market.
Correct.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
So you basically bought that house. How long did you live in the single-family home?
I lived in that for another year and 2 months.
A year and a few months, and then you started looking for another property.
Yeah, then I started looking for the next property, and for a variety of reasons, my flightiness being part of it, I decided I wanted to leave Washington, and so I actually moved to Salt Lake City.
So you own 2 properties in Bremerton, and you decided to move across the country to Salt Lake City.
It's not across the country. It's only a 14-hour drive.
Yeah.
You realize Denver's across the country for James.
Yeah, basically, anytime I go north of Horsetooth, it's like Canada.
I only discovered like 2 weeks ago, he's never been to Laramie, for crying out loud.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. I don't think so.
I was trying to describe something up past Livermore, and he had no clue what I was talking about because he's never been up there. I was like, dude. So house number 3, I closed March 8th this year. I did conventional financing, 5% down, paid $265 for the house.
Did you buy it under market?
No.
Okay. What made you pick this one?
So this one I picked because I like stable blue-collar neighborhoods. I'm a blue-collar guy. I'm from the sticks of Wyoming. I like blue-collar neighborhoods, first of all. But when I was looking for this third house, I said, I'm buying a house that doesn't have a damn thing wrong with it.
Where'd you get that idea from?
So I know this guy, James. It finally sunk in, is what I'm saying.
What sunk in specifically? I mean, were you paying money out on the other 2 properties
Oh,
in maintenance?
yeah.
So is that part of the lesson?
Well, did I tell you about the plumbing issue with house number 2?
No, tell me about it.
So house number 2, built in 1954, all galvanized plumbing. The entire house needs to be replumbed. I did part of it. I didn't do the rest of it yet, but when I do, it's gonna be another $3,000. The roof is 20-something years old. And in the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of this water that comes out of the sky, okay? And it tears houses up, okay? The water damage, just natural water damage is insane, okay? I'm gonna have to redo the roof. I have an issue with the power. The original, back in the 40s and 50s, there were a couple manufacturers of the electrical panel boxes that were very prone to catching on fire. I have one of those installed. It's still there.
Did you hire an inspector when you bought your house?
I did.
And did your inspector?
That's how
point
I
that
know
out to
about
you?
all this stuff. The inspector caught all this.
And so you still decided.
But I still bought the house.
Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, I've probably got at least 20 grand of deferred maintenance I need to do on this house.
In house number 2? Okay, so house number 1, you've got at least 20 more thousand.
Correct.
In house number 2, you have 20,000 in repairs.
This is the $200,000 house or the $265,000?
Yes. 200.
The 265 is the third one.
Yeah. So the house I live in now was built in 1980.
Nice.
I said, I want natural gas.
Why'd you want natural gas?
Because electric heat is a significant burden on the electrical system. I learned that.
Because
okay?
one of the houses you bought had an electrical heating system?
In the Pacific Northwest, almost everything. Old houses are all baseboard electric, all of them. And so I want natural gas. I want something where the furnace and the water heater have been replaced within a reasonable period, like 5 years.
So let's talk about that for a second. So if you're getting the property and you factor in the cost of a new furnace and a new hot water heater, I'm not concerned about the age of those as long as you're getting money from that and you have it set aside to do it.
Right.
So
Well,
to make that a criteria of a house is weird.
House number 2 had a 40-year-old oil burning furnace in the crawl space.
Okay.
Okay. So the experience from the first 2 plus you know drilling it into my head, I finally was like, okay, I'm not buying a house that has anything wrong with it. So the house I bought was built in 1980, garage addition and basement finishing done in 2000, with all electrical brought up to code, furnace and water heater. Oh, I didn't mention the duplex. Within a first year, I had to replace the water heater on the other side.
So water heater's not bad though. What's $1,000 for you?
I paid $1,800 for it because it was an emergency job.
Whoa.
Because it was flooding the house.
But you could turn off the water.
To this day, nobody can tell me where the water shutoff is on the duplex. Okay. No idea where it is in the street. Nothing.
Okay.
The guy that replaced
It's
the water heater knows.
You had to turn it off to replace it.
That's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
But I have no idea where the street key access is. He did it through the crawl. So it's sunk in is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And I bought a house that was completely up to par. It's the nicest house I've ever lived in my entire life. I paid way more than I wanted to. I did not want to pay $265 for a house.
So let's talk about that. So your comfort level, you were struggling for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So things are starting to go well.
Because of my poverty mentality.
So you historically have had a poverty mentality, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah.
Like the living in your car type stuff.
Yeah. And here's what I actually did the math, and you sent it to your son.
Your budget, I did.
Yeah, my budget. So I'm in this phase where I'm doing another deep dive into a subject, and it's investing in the securities world. Because I had to make the tax move this year of opening a solo 401k, because I'm making more money than I ever have. I need to reduce my own tax bill, so I'm funneling $55,000, which is the cap this year.
Focus.
Into a solo 401k. So I started researching this, financial independence stuff, securities, and I was like, I don't know what my actual personal living expenses are because I manage my finances based on my business expenses. So I did it up, including my $1,500 a month mortgage on the Salt Lake house. I live a $27,000 a year lifestyle.
And you're able to live on $30,000.
Yeah.
So you're able to save quite a bit of money.
Yes.
And so even though you're saving money, are you putting...
But it's only started like really this year.
Right, very recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're basically now taking money that you could have used to put down payments, and you're choosing not to do that. What are you choosing to do with the money? Are you saving it?
Yes, I have more savings than I've ever had in my life. I've got about a 4-year cash reserve buffer.
So 4-year cash reserve buffer. What does that mean to you?
With no tenants in any of the properties, not including, this one's not factored in yet. So based on the 3 properties I have now, if no tenants, I could survive for 4 years.
So your living expenses, all the mortgages, taxes, and insurance on the 3 properties, you have a 4-year runway to do that.
And I'm still not comfortable.
You're not comfortable, like, emotionally?
It's not enough.
Okay.
Because what if 2008 happens again? What if the markets go to crap? What if what happened 2 weeks ago in Turkey? What if that happens to the U.S. currency? This is the stuff I think about. Like, what if it just all goes to pot?
Brian has something to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, even if it all does, right? You already own the property, so it's in the past. Your mortgage payment is fixed.
They're leveraged. Oh my God, I'm in debt up to my eyeballs, Brian.
Yeah, but you're still going to rent it out, right? Your properties aren't going to sit empty for 4 years. You're going to actually drop your rent to get a decent tenant in there who can pay rent. So your 4 years of expenses is probably realistically more like 8 to 10.
But you and I have different mentalities about money.
Sure, but even then, you can legitimately put down on paper what that looks like for you, right?
Correct.
Like, hey, if I have to drop rent in half, which has never happened, right, historically, and even the crash, like it didn't take that long for us to
Correct.
recover. So, and that's the worst one we've ever seen in our life.
Well, and the thing is, after I close on this property in Greeley, if I house hack, I get 3 roommates in there, and I, rent out the house in Salt Lake, I will technically be able to afford my entire lifestyle without dropping it, as long as the properties are occupied.
Sure.
I can effectively bare bones retire.
Yeah, and I think because your living expenses are so low, that assists you in your 4 years is probably really more like 12, right? I mean,
but I don't look at it that way.
I get that you don't look at it that way. I'm
well,
just saying.
and also, you gotta. Here's another thing I'm like cringing about, because I gotta put a down payment on this place. I gotta write a $40,000 check here in a month. Like knowing that money is going to go out. I mean, I've got it, and in reality, it's not going to impact me at all. But psychologically, oh my God.
I think other people can relate to that. The idea that you have a certain amount in savings, and all of a sudden your account balance is going to go from $60,000 or whatever it is down to 10 or 15 or 20 or half or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people coming up with down payments can relate to that.
I cringe. I mean,
affects you on any level, because I'm buying 2 houses and I'm looking at the bank accounts going, man, that's gonna suck.
Totally, yeah. And you were off mic, but you basically said even Brian does it at any level. He's buying a couple more houses, and he's concerned about the bank account balances going down too.
You know what though? And again, this is my issue, not yours. But talking about mindset stuff, it's the way I interpret what you just said is I filter it through my mental thingy, and I look at well, Brian's not affected because you're rich. No, I'm serious. No, I mean, and I'm not.
Sweet. Can you put the money in my account?
But no, when you have a certain mindset, that's how you filter when I hear stuff like that.
So we've
you know what I'm
actually,
saying?
I'll let you have your time second, but I want to make a comment. This has kind of come up at some of the recent
We
interviews.
talk about this all the time, by the way.
Yeah, we have, but too many times. In addition, though, like we've had conversations with the interviews recently, and it's come up that the first house or two that you buy, those are the easy ones. And everyone's all stressed out that those are the hard ones. I need to really learn the stuff. Where it really becomes hard is you've got all your money already invested, and you're struggling to buy house number 24. And you really got to stretch and get creative because there's no traditional home to buy and stuff like that. So
I don't really have much to say. I mean, it's just a mindset difference.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
And that's all it really is, and we could go round and round. But
The accountant in my head, my internal accountant, my tax accountant goes, dude, STFU, you're fine, okay? But my inner 12-year-old is like freaking out about it.
do you think you're freaking out more because of the bankruptcy and foreclosure and stuff in the past? Are you more conservative, like hoarding money so that you never have that happen again? Is that
Yes.
part of the?
It's part of it. Although, which is ironic because I also consider the bankruptcy the second best financial decision I ever made in my life.
What's the first best?
Joining the Navy.
Okay. So you bought these 3 houses. You're living in the current house now, and you, from what I remember, you wanted to speed up the process and acquire another property.
Right.
So how'd you do that?
So I'm doing accelerated Nomad, but it's still Nomad. So any mortgage people here? No? Okay. So I'm actually buying the house in Greeley as a vacation home.
So an interesting little twist is because it's far enough away, he lives in Salt Lake, he can actually buy a vacation home, and he comes here. I mean, he definitely comes out to visit. He lived here before, he has friends here, he wants to come out and visit, and this is a good jumping off point for doing some other things he wants to do. So he is buying a second home in Greeley, new construction property, and one of the things he plans on doing is finding roommates, having roommates rent part of the house out, and then he will live in this case, the basement. He basically is doing new construction. He's going to have part of the basement finished so that he has the whole basement to himself. He could rent out, 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms upstairs, cover some of the mortgage, kind of offset it, and then he has a place to kind of crash when he comes here to visit and do that stuff.
Well, and I also pass through here a lot because a lot of my seminars that I conduct are on the East Coast, and I drive. I mean, I do fly occasionally, but I do a lot of driving as well. It's another part of it's cheaper. So, because when I fly first class. figure that one out mentally.
Yeah, so there's actually some really weird stuff
Yeah,
going on there, which we're
yeah.
not going to go into tonight.
But let's talk about the basement bathroom, the landscaping.
Yes, let's talk about that.
So when I originally went looking for this house,
Actually, I want to tell this part of the story.
Okay.
So he comes out to visit, and we are grabbing breakfast at McDonald's, and I say, hey, you want to go look at some houses while you're here?
And this was like 3 months ago.
So we decided to go look at some new construction
Right.
houses.
You took me to Severance, I think it was.
I took you to Severance. We looked.
Expensive breakfast you've ever had.
Yeah. So this is Brian is chiming in. It's the most expensive breakfast you've ever had.
Actually, you bought.
I bought. Well, exactly. Of course, I'm buying breakfast.
He bought breakfast. You bought the house.
Yeah.
Brian had a similar experience very recently where I took him out to breakfast. He got whatever he wanted, and at the end of breakfast, he ended up buying a couple houses.
Nice.
So.
Yeah. He's a good salesman.
I'm not a good salesman. I just like show you stuff and you make your own decision. So anyway, we go out and we look at houses, and you're like running numbers in your head about owning the house. I really was not intending to sell you anything because you just moved, and I wasn't prepared for you. We didn't think about this second vacation home deal at all. We were just talking about numbers and what they look like and what investors were doing here. And you started running numbers in your head, and then you go home. I thought it was dead. And what'd you do?
I went home, did Jason's version of the math instead of James's version of the math.
Which is just adding $500 a month to cash flow for my numbers.
Okay. And I'm like, and then I pestered you. I think I asked you at least 5 or 6 times, what will this model rent for? What would this model rent for?
Which are fair questions.
Right. And then I'm like, the numbers, by the way, even the way I look at them, don't work the way they do in Bremerton or Salt Lake City, because the prices here are just, in my book, they're insane. Okay. But
just hold that story for a second. What did you think rent was going to be on the $260,000 property you just bought in Utah? What did you think it was going to be?
I went into it thinking rent would be $1,800.
Okay. So $1,800 on 260. We probably haven't seen that for 3 years here.
2015, maybe 2014. And that here, like when I was buying.
Yeah, but I'm like, do you want to answer the question?
When I was buying properties in like 2013, right, it was 225 and you were getting 1,500 kind of tops.
Okay.
And so like 265 at 1,800, we'd have been buying those all day long here. Those are just like great deals here.
Right.
They're not. They're like 3 years from the partnership. Oh, yeah.
Those numbers aren't that far off from what we saw 3 years ago.
Then yes. Yeah. Their price, the house price was
A little more, but not like crazy much more. And this is new.
closer to 300.
I thought they were like 280.
A lot.
Okay. Anyway.
Well, originally the model that I was interested in that Journey builds out here was the Alaska. It's their entry level ranch. It's the lowest price one they build. At $299,999. I'm like,
Prices from the 200s.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
That's
And so I was telling him, I don't want to go over 300,000. I don't want to go over 300,000. I don't want to go over 300,000.
So let's talk about that for a brief second. What is the big deal about going over 300,000?
It's just another mental thing. Just like going to 150 to 200 to 250. The house in Salt Lake, I didn't want to go over 250. I spent 265.
But it's arbitrary.
Totally.
Okay.
It's all mental.
Okay, so you decided to buy the house, and did you, I tell you the upgrades you probably need to buy it as a rental property?
Yeah, he threw this, okay, typically you're going to look at, this, and this, that's $21,000 in upgrades all over the base Journey home price. And I'm just like, as you've already learned, I'm like, okay, let's see. I can do without drapes. I'll do the backyard landscaping myself. I'm like, okay, what can I whittle away? And I wanted and we had a long conversation, maybe that's actually more with you, about the Maryland versus the Kansas. And it became a big deal for me. I want a main floor master. That is something important. You don't see it very often, but in an elderly community or with older tenants, it's going to be a huge draw for them.
By the way, this is not an elderly community. It's a brand new construction neighborhood.
I know that.
And another point is he's not even living on the main floor. He's living in the basement.
Correct. But it was something I was thinking about. Okay?
Which is arbitrary.
Totally arbitrary. It was something I wanted. And so this was the Maryland model. It was, I guess, a new model. I'm getting one of the earlier ones, I guess.
Nice model.
Main floor master, and then I was just like, oh, and I'll just live in the basement. Okay. And then James comes along and says, well, you're gonna want a bathroom down there. I'm like, it'll be roughed in, and I'll worry about it in 5 years.
Yeah, then my thinking is he's thinking, it's roughed in, I'll just uncap it and use it. And I'm thinking, I don't think so. Not a good idea. This is the guy who's living in his car, so. Yeah, so what did I delete? What, I think he did too. The conversation never occurred, but I knew what was going through his mind. So what did I tell you about?
I will neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, what did I tell you about the bathroom?
And he was just like, dude, it's what, $4,500. Just finish, leave the rest of the basement unfinished, but do the bathroom. Because it'll make it easier if I'm house hacking and I don't have to go up and down stairs, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, nah, I'm not gonna worry about it. But he talked me into it. He didn't talk me into it. You made a solid argument for it. And after I slept on it for a week, it made sense. Same with, what was it? I was griping about the garage door opener, which is $300 or $350.
$350.
And I'm just like, yeah, I'll install that later. I'll get one at Lowe's and I'll do it myself. Okay. What was the other thing? It was.
So you came out about a month.
No, even
or so.
before the landscaping. Was it the refrigerator? I think it might have been the fridge.
You basically went through everything that we normally do upgrades for and wanted to not do it.
Right. And then so I ended up doing a change order and paying the $300 change fee that Journey charges for the admin. Had to send in another earnest money
So
check.
some of your EQ stuff ended up costing you money.
Correct. That's the point.
Yeah. And we went out and looked at the house, I don't know, a month or so after you went under contract on it, and we went and looked at it, and I was just talking to you about the backyard landscaping, and you were swearing up and down, I absolutely do not want backyard landscaping. I want to put in this in myself, and I'm not going to get a sprinkler system because I'll just water the grass when I come out here on my trips. and you decided, you were like really adamant about it, and so what did I tell you? Did I force you to do it?
No, but you told me what it was probably going to cost if I had a landscaper do it afterwards versus having Journey do it. It's a couple grand difference.
Maybe.
And when we were looking at it, all it was the basement was poured, so it was a hole in the ground and a pile of dirt. That's what I was looking at. And then when I got home, when I went back to Salt Lake, Salt Lake's a desert. Okay, I have no sprinkler system at my house in Salt Lake City.
And how long were you gone for?
For my seminars and stuff, I'm usually gone for 2 weeks at a shot.
So you left your house in Salt Lake over the springtime, summertime.
This was like 3 weeks ago.
No, it was more than that.
4 weeks? It wasn't that long ago.
It was in the summer. So basically you left your house in Salt Lake for 2 weeks unwatered in the summer. What happened to your lawn?
Came back, everything's dead. Including my tomatoes.
So what'd you end up doing?
So, and then I said, okay, I get it now. It's just as hot in the summer in Colorado. I apparently forgot about that, even though I lived here for almost a decade. And so I call them, all right, fine, what's it going to cost? Blah, blah, blah. Another $300 change fee and another earnest money check.
So if you'd done it in the beginning, you wouldn't have had these change fees.
Right. Okay. So the house that I wanted for $300, I'm now at $339.9-ish.
Is that right?
Yeah. And the appraisal came back today for $345.
Okay, so you're getting it $5K or so under like where you are. Right, exactly.
But mentally, it still bugs me to death.
What bugs you?
I'm paying $340,000 for a freaking house.
Yeah, so why did you do that? Why did you buy the house?
Because some other things happened in Salt Lake City. My part of the reason I moved there was I was way overly attached to my dog. She passed away in April. Sorry.
So basically, you had your dog passed, and you were thinking about, originally you moved there so you could be with your dog and have the dog have a yard and everything. And when your dog passed, you basically said, hey, I don't know if I even need to stay in Salt Lake at this point. I can move out of the area. I can go to Colorado. I can travel. I might decide what I want to do later. So you did not feel like you needed to stay there at all.
Right. Everything that I had moved there for kind of went away. And, sorry. And so my next thought process was, I'll just go back on the road or go live in the Winnebago or
Not happening. First of all, you don't even own it anymore.
Yeah, I know. I'll just go back overseas. And so when I started thinking of regressing my thinking that way, it was like, screw Salt Lake. I'll just buy new construction the way he does. I'll use his property manager. I'll have him and Tammy.
You're going to use my property manager? I didn't know about that. Oh, you mean like after you're living there for...
Right, after the year. And I'm like, okay, fine. If I just do everything here in Colorado and just pay them to do it, then a lot of I can go do whatever.
So why would you buy a house here in Colorado where the numbers aren't amazing when you could go buy in Bremerton, which you have some connections to, or Salt Lake City, where the numbers are slightly better than here? Why would you do this market versus other markets?
Because of the realization that I'm in a financial position now to do things differently. Even with my mental hang-ups, I have options I didn't have even a year ago, 2 years ago, right? And so it is related to my income. That's an obvious thing. And when you look at, like, pay attention to his charts and stuff like that, especially in comparison to the stock market, the Nomad investing plan is a no-brainer, okay? And here's the thing. Even if you disappear overseas, okay, you still are taxed on your worldwide income as an American. We're one of only 3 countries in the world that does that, okay? By the way, one of the other ones is Eritrea. Go find that on a map.
All right, so refocus.
Oh, right. Squirrel! So
why'd you buy here?
You need a tax home somewhere, no matter what you do.
So is this sort of your tax home at this point? Or are you really moving back here? What is the thought process? You don't know. So you're really just playing it super loosey-goosey. Yep. And this is part of the challenge I have with Jason sometimes. We get on the phone and
Correct.
1 month he tells me something, and then the next month it's a totally different plan. And that's, I think, part of the EQ issue. It's like,
yes.
You don't know what you want to do, and you're super flexible, and your job allows you to
I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah, I think that's true.
But I do know that if I buy enough houses, eventually it won't matter.
I think that's probably true.
I do recognize that.
So how much in real estate, including the one you're about to buy, what is the value? Because we put a number up there, and I'm not coming up with that same number.
It'll be $1,000,000. I thought you calculated $1,050,000, $1,060,000.
Is that what it actually works out to
Something
be?
like that, just barely over $1 million.
So what's the first house worth now?
First house is worth $230,000.
What's the second one
Number
worth?
2 is worth $250,000.
You doing the math on this?
Yeah, he was.
For 265?
Huh?
No, that's the third one.
Yeah, so 230, 250. The 265 house, I just closed in March. It's probably worth, it's probably worth what I paid for it. Maybe
Okay.
maybe 270.
1.085.
Okay.
Okay. So you're really just over $1 million doing this.
Right.
And you had a bankruptcy 2008 or so to do that, and you've since recovered. When you first started back on the path, your income wasn't really crazy.
I was not 6 figures.
Okay. And so you were basically doing that to start back on the path for retirement.
Yeah.
And as you've continued, it's helped that you've done, your income has increased, but you haven't really used it. You've only put 10% down even on the...
Oh yeah, I'm only putting 10% down on this house in Greeley.
Yeah, because you're doing it as a second home.
I'm buying it as a second home. I will have PMI.
And you put 5% down on the other house?
In Salt Lake, yeah.
So can you calculate equity? Did you do an estimate of equity? You put 5% down. You put 0% down on both the other ones. In fact, you was negative on the first two.
Because
you
of
had
the
funding
VA
fees.
funding fee, I was upside down.
And you had 10K in repairs on the first one. He probably has 40,000 repairs on 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then he basically put 5% down on 265 and 10% down on 350.
And in a year, this one's not going, even if I was generous with the rental allowance, this one won't cash flow.
So what do you think it's going to be? How negative is it going to be?
I think you told me, what, 1,900 if I'm lucky? 1,950 maybe?
If you're lucky. Yeah, I think probably 1,900 is a good
So
number to pay in there.
even without vacancy and maintenance allowance, but just property management and PITI, I'm upside down.
What property management? What are you without property management? What's your calculation?
At 1,950, I'll be...
What's your payment, do you know?
1910, 1920.
Your payment is 1910 with 10% down? Okay, so you're slightly negative doing that with 10% down, buying in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even with property management, not vacancy, no maintenance, I'm upside down on this one.
And then what do you think your cash flow is going to be on the one you're moving out of in Salt Lake at some point? What
When
do you
I
say?
move out of that one, if I'm being realistic, and by the way, it needs about probably 3,000 or 4,000 I got to put into it for little, just little stuff, stuff the dog chewed up, basically. With property management and vacancy, but not a maintenance allowance, I'll be positive maybe like $50. So break even.
Okay. So what was the equity position?
Depends on if you're going to count all the 30 to 40K stuff. It's
Right.
between 85 and 110.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of equity.
So 85 and 110 equity, starting with an investment of, what do we calculate? It's like 15%, 10, 20,000, 30, let's see, 35 and 5 of that is 13. So that's
I mean, really, you just bought 2
50,000.
houses. So you ignore those and you look at the original investment in the other 2.
Yeah.
Because these are basically new.
Sure. Yeah. This is like appreciation.
Remember, I just bought number 3 in March.
Yeah.
And now I'm buying number 4.
So what is the plan? Are you going to continue to buy more, or what are you thinking?
So what I've been talking to you about is doing some of the partnership deals. I'm over exuberantly excited about some of the numbers you've shared with me on those. It's another thing that'll be a shiny object that may or may not happen.
What do you think the numbers were?
Like the 4 that you bought.
What do you think the numbers are, just return on investment wise? This is another great example of me saying something to somebody, and then sometimes they misinterpret my number and they think that they're like amazing numbers, and they had the numbers wrong. So what do you think the numbers
Well,
are?
are you talking return on equity or
Return on investment.
cash on cash?
Return on investment, total ROI.
I'd imagine you're 14 to 18%.
Okay, so this is the crazy thing. So the numbers for most properties here in Colorado, when you use normal 3% appreciation and even 0% cash flow, is probably going to be between 25 and 30%.
All right.
So that's what the numbers are with everything: debt pay down, appreciation, depreciation, and cash flow.
I think he's talking about your partnership.
Right.
Yeah, the partnership stuff isn't as good though, is it?
He was almost probably on for partnership.
Yeah, for a partnership, which he doesn't have those numbers, but if he was
That's my ballpark. Yeah.
Okay. So you want to be a cash partner?
Yeah, like if you and I bought a house together.
Sure.
I'm assuming 14 to 18 is probably where it's going to be.
Okay, maybe. Depends on how it's structured, obviously, but yeah.
Okay.
Probably not.
So I want to do some of those. I do plan on disposing of house number 2, the one that needs all the plumbing work. I do realize that is something I need to get out of.
How are you going to exit?
My plan is to 1031 exchange out of it.
You're going to sell it with a real estate broker?
Yeah, and then use a 1031 qualified intermediary, and then take, figure what, 70, 80,000, maybe 100, depending on when I sell it, and move that into something else. Probably here.
For most people, I would suggest you use lease option exit. Save yourself the real estate commission. In this particular case, you don't want to do the labor and you're not there.
Well, and also in Washington and Oregon states, lease options are, they're not illegal, but they're almost illegal. They're very heavily regulated due to equity skimming laws that were passed in the wake of the financial crisis.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to do lease option and RTOs in Washington and Oregon.
Okay. He just doesn't like the property. It's not a good long-term.
I realize that because of the deferred maintenance and all that stuff, it wasn't a bad buy, but it was I don't want it in my portfolio going forward.
Okay. We have about 10 minutes left. If you guys have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll continue to ask some questions, but feel free to raise your hands and we'll try to get to your questions. So
this wasn't as exciting as Mary's interview or is, or.
What do you mean? It's exciting in a it's exciting in a different way. I mean, you have very different characteristics of this than they do, and I mean, you've had some very different challenges and some different.
I will
struggles.
say, go listen to Mary's interview. It was good.
Yeah, Mary's interview was really good. So, what is the plan moving forward? Are you continuing to buy properties? Are you not buying properties?
I will probably continue to buy properties. I will put more money down because I have it.
So you're wanting to put more money down?
I will. The house here will probably. I'm not going to say it's my last Nomad, but I'm going to act as if it's my last Nomad property.
And do 20% down, or do partnerships? Is what you're saying?
I'll do 20% down. I'll do partnerships. I've looked at some of the syndication stuff out there. If I can do partnership deals, especially with you, where you're bringing in the expertise, you're finding the property, you're putting together the financing stuff, and all I got to do is write a check, sign me up.
So that's the part that you want. You want to be a more passive type of investor.
I want it to be more passive, so that, especially because my business has grown so much that it obviously makes sense for me to focus on growing my business. Plus, I mean, I'm not anti-stock market, but I'm very bearish on the stock market. You know, since equities
So where do you have the reserves?
So again, I'm 40 years old. My securities portfolio is 70% bonds, 30% equities, which is the exact opposite of what any financial advisor would ever tell you to do. That is how, based on my age, that's how skittish I am about the stock market.
Okay.
So
you're skittish overall.
Correct.
And part of it, I think, is the bankruptcy and the foreclosure
Correct.
stuff.
Yeah.
So do you feel as though, you know, buying properties retail, you know, buying properties that don't have amazing cash flow, because obviously the one you're buying now, do you feel that's a risk for you, having kind of gone through bankruptcy and foreclosure? Is this a challenge for you, kind of buying these types of properties?
You mean mentally or financially?
I think both.
So mentally, it's huge.
Okay.
Huge. And like when I start doing partnership deals, it's going to be even harder because I'm not going to have control.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to show up and fix the leaky faucet.
You know, some might argue, with some of your proclivities and challenges, that you not being in control is a good thing.
Agreed.
Right? I mean, because you have some challenges.
Agreed.
Being consistent and staying on focus and stuff like that.
Which is like when I left Bremerton, I wasn't going to hire property managers. I was like, oh, I'll save the few $100s a month. I'll just manage them from 1,200 miles away. It won't be a problem. Okay? But guess who I had that conversation with? And he was like, don't do that. Okay? And in retrospect, I'm glad that I hired a property manager. Okay? And if you haven't listened to I'm just going to plug your stuff. If you haven't listened to the property management classes and the tenant screening class.
That's also Brian's.
Okay? And you also did a screening the property management company class. That was yours. Okay. So listen.
We're interchangeable, essentially. I don't know.
Listen to those if you're looking for property manager, because I interviewed like 6 property managers, and most of them suck.
Yeah. Property manager, it's a hard business.
It is.
Any final questions for Jason before we kind of break here?
Squirrel.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to say about your kind of investing or anything like that?
The only thing I can really say is and I know this sounds so hokey when I hear other people say it, but the whole thing is, if I can do it, you can do it too. I think that with my proclivities and some of my hang-ups and where I come from, my background financially, you know, if I can make Nomad in particular work, I think anybody else can.
Yeah, Royce said something pretty profound during his interview, and he basically said he won't know if his advice was going to be valid until many years in the future when you can actually see the results.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to tell, you know, your situation. You've kind of done this very recently, which was, you know, part of the things, like last 3 years you've acquired a bunch of stuff, and we don't know how you're going to perform. I mean, the markets could go down, but as Brian says, if you're doing it for cash flow and you're holding long term, you know, there's less concern about that. But you know, I like that you have huge cash reserves. I think that's a big plus for you, especially.
Well, if I talk to any financial planner, they would look at what I'm doing with my savings and how I have it allocated, and they'd say I was insane.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, because I hold a lot of cash.
We have a question.
And I'm not fully invested in the market.
My question was, if you have the ability to put more down and actually cash flow the
Why don't
property
I?
in Greeley, why wouldn't you do that?
Because
Like put 20% down versus
I'm hoarding the cash as a reserve because of my past history and the bankruptcy and like cash. This is the biggest thing I learned from the bankruptcy, is that cash is the savior. Cash. Everything could go to crap, and then as long as I've got the cash to pay the mortgages on vacant properties, I can put food in my own throat, I'll be okay.
Yeah, and basically, it's really hard to access equity, especially that last 20% or 25%. So if you're putting 20% down or 25% down, and you don't have any cash reserves, that's not ideal in my mind.
No.
I think I'd rather see you have additional cash reserves.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's like when I set up my solo 401k in April, most off-the-shelf solo 401ks for self-employed people, they come without a borrowing provision. You can't take a loan from your solo 401k. I went and sought out a company that would let me take out a 401k loan just so I could tap it. Not that I ever will, but if I absolutely had to, it's there.
Awesome. Any final questions? We're about 2 minutes before 8 o'clock, and we will stick around for the class after class. Hey, thanks again for coming. I really do appreciate you answering all the questions, and if you guys would give Jason a round of applause.
Sorry for breaking down in tears.
Yeah. See you all after the class.
Sure. Sorry about the dude.